When people ask about the future Philippine coffee, they usually mean, will it become more popular? Will it get more expensive? Will it compete internationally? But the people who are producing our coffee are asking something different. Where's the next generation that will farm our land? How do we produce quality consistently? Will we produce enough? To explore these questions, I want to take you to one of my personal favorite coffee origins in the Philippines, Lake Napalit, Bukidnon. Lake Napalit is a 36-hectare tectonic lake situated just outside the Kalatungan mountain range. The Manobo, who originally settled here, consider it culturally sacred, holding their annual rituals at its shores. Lakes promote local biodiversity. All kinds of life are drawn here to drink, breed, and find shelter. And this matters for coffee, because an ecosystem like this one, filled with life, is correlated with a better quality cup. When you taste lemongrass and strawberries in this coffee, it's not because the coffee's been infused with some sort of flavoring. It's the soil health, the biodiversity and life that pollinates the trees and controls the pests. The way the sun travels over the mountains, the shade trees, the fog that rolls in over the range every morning. And it's us and how we contribute to that ecosystem, whether positively or negatively. I spent 2 life-changing weeks processing coffee here, and after everything I experienced and learned, I was itching to share what feels like a coffee utopia. Young farmers following best practices in quality control, real infrastructure and training, and true bayanihan, which, if you're not from the Philippines, is a core Filipino value representing communal unity, teamwork, and mutual support. This is episode 2 in our series discovering the Philippine coffee origin story, Lake Napalit, Bukidnon. The average age of a coffee farmer globally is 55 years old, and only around 5% of producers worldwide are under the age of 35. The people who grow the coffee we drink every day are on average closer to retirement than they are at the very beginning of their careers. Meet Gia, Joe Rex, Christopher, Marvin, and Elgene. I shadowed these 5 young farmers to learn about their everyday lives and how they take care of the Curve Coffee Collaborators coffee lots in Pangantucan, Bukidnon. In the Philippines, you may be surprised that not everything that we call coffee is made with actual coffee. Before we arrived, Gia had prepared a kettle of maize, corn coffee. Similarly to coffee beans, the corn is roasted in a pan, ground, and boiled cowboy style over a fire. The wood she was using looked familiar, and Gia told me she was actually burning wood from the coffee trees themselves. After pruning unproductive branches, they keep the wood and use it to cook. Gia's home is right in the middle of a coffee nursery. And every morning, she fills about 300 bags with a mixture of rice hull and soil, which need to be packed just right to give baby coffee plants the best chance at survival when they get planted inside. She toured me around the nursery, showing me the different species and varieties that she was tending to. Sweet coffee, bourbons, Robusta, and more. When I asked her about her dreams, she told me her family had just planted their own lot of Arabica and that she wanted it to be successful. After breakfast, Christopher took me a few steps away to a lot planted with a special Arabica variety originally developed in El Salvador, Pacamara. Aside from controlling the shape of the tree, pruning promotes fruit production, allows for air circulation and sunlight penetration, and even prevents the tree from becoming malnourished. I discovered that there's a lot more to pruning than just cutting off branches. You need to understand the tree itself, its age, its fertilization history, its health. Christopher showed me different pests and explained how each one affects a tree's productivity. It's all of these factors together that he has to weigh when deciding what to do with each tree. That requires a serious depth of technical knowledge and familiarity with your farm. After pruning a few trees, Joe Rex took me to the drying facility and showed me the processing experiments they were running. Some of the coffee cherries smelled amazing, but there was one that I think was a failed experiment because when I smelt it, it reminded me of wet socks. Every day, multiple times a day, Joe Rex takes measurements of each lot, temperature, moisture content, and he writes down his observations. That way, if something tastes off at the end, they can look back at the data and make an educated guess about why. And if a coffee turns out exceptional, that farmer can attempt to replicate it, because they have the numbers. Jorek showed me that meticulous data collection is a cornerstone of quality coffee production. Gia, Christopher, and Jorex weren't farming the way most people imagine Philippine coffee farming looks. They were using technology, industry standard best practices, and combining all of that with a really intimate and personal understanding of the land. That combination is the foundation for something truly remarkable. Young people in the Philippines frequently perceive coffee farming as unprofitable and unappealing. And that perception, even where it's beginning to shift, doesn't just change overnight. But the gap isn't really about coffee. It's about whether young people can see a version of this work that feels modern, skilled, and genuinely worth choosing. Coffee from all around Bukidnon travels here where it gets processed. And these young farmers have access to advanced equipment and technology that allows them to do that at scale. A huge batch of freshly picked cherries came into the mill, so we got to work. We put the coffee into big vats filled with water to wash them, and after removing the floaters and debris, we then scoop the cherries into fermentation tanks and let the microbes and wild yeasts on the coffee skins work their magic. Then we headed to where the road ends, and began hiking into the forest to visit Marvin's family's heritage coffee farm. The mill represented everything modern Philippine coffee is working towards. The forest we were walking into represented everything it needs to protect in order to get there. Before I knew it, we were under the canopy of the Bukidnon forest. The trees were thick, old, and healthy. Philippine coffee truly grows in some of the most beautiful places in the world. Marvin works as a farm manager, leading teams of coffee farmers around Bukidnon and around the country. But this coffee farm in the forest is where it all began for him. His father and grandfather planted these trees, and now he had inherited them and was responsible for taking care of the land. He led us to one particular Robusta tree bearing purple fruit. I'd never seen anything like it. Robusta trees typically produce red fruit, but Marvin told us that he'd processed and roasted a special batch from this tree and that it tasted sweet with notes of cucumber. This is what we call agroforestry. In many parts of the world, forests are actually cleared to plant coffee. But coffee is temperature sensitive, and climate change is forcing farmers higher and higher up mountains in search for cooler grounds. An agroforestry system like this one pushes back against that. The forest canopy keeps the floor up to 4 degrees cooler. The biodiversity supports natural pollination and pest control. And the soil and root network below strengthens the trees and retains water through dry spells. Marvin's farm reminded me that the future Philippine coffee isn't just about new technology and modern facilities. It's about understanding our forests and choosing farm practices that don't destroy them but rebuild them. 20-30 years ago, coffee was growing all around this mountain range. But when farm gate prices dropped to 20 pesos a kilo, farmers started cutting down their trees and replacing them with cash crops like sugarcane and corn. So for what seems like an entire generation, this area lost its coffee. Only a handful of farmers preserved their trees. But now that Bukidnon coffee has been growing in popularity, and people are discovering that coffees from this particular mountain are special, farmers have begun replanting. The day we visited this coffee cooperative facility, the sun was scorching. Farm workers had a washed coffee drying on the patio, walking across it to rake the beans so they dried evenly under the heat. Patio drying is probably the most efficient sun drying method because it allows you to process a high volume of coffee at once. There are trade-offs though. A rake, while efficient, can chip the beans, but it's far less labor intensive than flipping coffee by hand. The workers were keen to tell us about their work and even let me try it. Walking back and forth under that open sun, I quickly understood how easy it would be to get heat stroke. That's why the farm workers here are fully covered when doing field work. As much as I wanted to take off my flannel, I knew I had to keep it on. As I walked across the green beans, carefully balancing my steps, I kept thinking about how many different farms this coffee had come from. The cooperative also had some special lots on their raised drying beds. Raised beds allow for better air circulation underneath the coffee, which leads to more even drying. Beans in raised beds typically get turned over by hand. Even drying matters because the moisture content of a green bean directly influences how it behaves in the roaster, so buyers treat correct moisture levels as a key quality indicator. Inside the facility, we chatted with the woman sorting through cherries and green beans. Before coffee ever reaches your cup, it gets sorted and resorted again to remove defects. Moldy, insect damaged, and over-fermented beans are separated out and sold as commercial-grade coffee, the kind used to make instant. The good beans are graded into premium and specialty quality. Those are either roasted on site or sold to specialty coffee roasters. Cooperatives give the wider community a chance to bring their coffee produce together, increasing volume and giving them more access to the market. For us, part of discovering an origin is getting as close to it as possible. So we took the Lake Napalit coffee out to the lake itself. We got on a balsa and pulled our way out to the middle. I wish I could start every morning like this, brewing coffee with Mount Kalatungan behind us. This coffee was my first introduction to Curve Coffee collaborators, and it's been a family favorite ever since. But spending these 2 weeks here, processing coffee with the farmers, has completely changed the way I think about this simple bag of coffee. For the farmers who grow this coffee, the origin is more than a label. It's their home, their livelihood, their pride. More and more people are discovering Philippine coffee every day. Our coffees are scoring specialty level scores across all species. Now we're even winning international level awards, and we're seeing more and more Philippine coffees represented on the world stage in barista competitions and brewing competitions. But just because something has great potential doesn't mean that its future is guaranteed. There are still more young people to be encouraged and trained, more infrastructure to be built, more trees to plant, forests to protect, and collaboration to happen. Philippine coffee isn't just an agricultural product. It's a piece of national identity. We are a coffee drinking nation. Our coffee is worth fighting for, worth preserving, and our origin stories are worth telling. This is Timdrinkscoffee, where coffee meets contemplation.